Hi, friends. This was our first Sunday that we did a little children's church time, and I wanted to go over a couple things. We're going to do this every Sunday in August, and then the week after Labor Day weekend, we'll start back Sunday school at 9:30. Before church today, the children that met me, we went over that in the bulletin we find numbers for the hymns that we sing. And I told them when they went in church to look for two books that were in the pews, and that the blue book, the hymnal, was a book of songs. We went over that the songs are in the hymn book in numerical order, and that they can look for the first hymn that we're going to sing when they get to church and get ready. I encouraged them to hold a book while we're singing, even if they can't read. That's going to give them something to do with their hands. It's going to get them in practice doing what everyone else is doing. All right? We looked at hymn 427, which was our first hymn today at 10:30 Mass. And we talked about how there are verses and that we read the verses across and down the page like we read a book. I told them that this hymn has 5 verses. We sing all the verses. I showed them that in this hymn there was a group of words that's repeated lots of times, and it was, Jesus Christ be praised. So as we sat there singing, holding our book, I tried to get them to hear when that was repeated and let them sing each time, may Jesus Christ be praised. I think we did a pretty good job. We talked about to praise someone means to brag on them, to say good things about them. And when we give praise to Jesus, we are thinking about and remembering how great he is. We left, and we're going to leave the next 3 weeks right after the thurifer leaves, right behind whoever's the thurifer when they go out after the gospel reading. I would love for them to come down before the gospel reading and stand with me on the rug that's down there by that door where we're leaving. When we went back, I told them that we were going to be missing when we were out there the homily or the sermon, the creed, which is when we say the big things that we believe, the prayers of the people, the prayer of general confession, the passing of the peace, and the announcements. And then we were going to be coming back in. And then we grabbed a snack. While we were eating, we did a really quick craft where we folded a piece of paper in thirds. I had them draw 3 people on the paper. And we reviewed the gospel reading. I asked them, I said, who are some of the people or the characters in this story that we read about, the true story? And they know that each week when we come back, the next 3 weeks in August, that when I ask that, we're going to be looking at the gospel reading. So one person they can always say, Jesus is always going to be a person in the story that we're looking at. But we heard that Peter, James, and John were with him, that they were on a mountain, and that he was praying. They learned that while they were there, Jesus' appearance changed, where he was dazzling or shining. And we put a little tinfoil, aluminum foil thing on our picture that we drew to remind us that Jesus' appearance changed. I also had them to think about that the Old Testament reading for that day was actually about Moses, one of those 2 men who were no longer living that appeared with Jesus during this transfiguration. And we learned that when Moses came down from the mountain, when he got the 10 Commandments, our Old Testament lesson said the skin of his face shone because he had been talking to God. We talked a little bit about how Jesus is called the light of the world. We talked about how when Moses had been with God, his face was shining. And so light is supposed to make us think of God. We could go farther by thinking about how in the beginning, what did God create? He said, let there be light. They're not going to get all the symbolisms about light and darkness, but as we start to think about them, and they mean even more to us, part of that's going to catch on. And I want them to start seeing how the 4 readings thematically are grouped together. We'll see next week how that goes. I had a pretty easy week to start off with. So I gave them, each family, I gave a candle. So we took a candle home, and you might want to light it and talk about how Jesus is the light of the world. You could ask your children if they were there, what happened in the gospel reading today, and why did you bring home this trifold picture of Moses, Jesus, and Elijah? I think we had fun. So next week, I'm going to still be talking about songs. So one thing I want them to remember is that our eyes during Mass can always follow the cross if it's moving. The cross is our picture reminder of Jesus, who is King of heaven and earth, and we bow to a king. So we are bowing to each of our picture reminders of Christ. When the cross is not moving, I want them to look at the person up front who's talking. Whether it's the reader who's doing the readings, or when we're in there later, the prayers, or whether it's a priest that's up there giving the homily, which they're not going to have practice with in August. But we should be looking towards the front and not looking all around. I think that's going to be easier for them to practice if they're sitting in the front in that transept for a few times. And I am prepared to sit with them, okay? I want them when they're there to do what we are doing. So if we're singing, I want them to hold their hymn book either alone or with someone that's beside them, whether they can read or not. I want them to practice the motion of it. And we're going to look at a few hymns each week. We won't have long enough for them to actually learn them, but it's going to be good practice. I want them to do the prayer hands when they're listening to the gospel, and I want you to help prep them to try to listen, because I'm going to see how much they get the story. Next week, I believe it actually is a story that has action in it during the gospel reading, so I'll ask them about that. Today, we came back around and came in from the front of the church, and the children found their families to sit with. I always want them to sit with their families for communion. I feel like that is a family time. You know, whether they are taking the bread and wine or whether they're doing the blessing. Okay, yeah, I had a great time. I'm going to email some announcements. It's going to have a list in it of Old Testament stories that we're going to do this semester in Sunday school. My goal is, however, haven't decided how we're going to change up the age groups, but during the school calendar year, we're going to do an overview of the Old Testament. Okay, I have already chosen a few weeks that we're going to not have Sunday school when I think that there may be a holiday. And I want you to look on your family calendar if you already know that you're going to be on vacation a certain week. If you could let me know, that will help us prepare. If 5 of us are going to be out on the same weekend because of a ball game or because of a long school holiday, then we probably just won't meet, if that makes sense. I also had a selection of books out for moms, and this is not an exhaustive list at all, but I think a few moms said that they would be interested in a book club. I think even if we don't read a book, it would be fun to get together once a month. So I'm going to let the moms vote on a weekday or a Sunday and a time that's best for them, and take book selections, and we will start that in September. Thanks, y'all.